Hello, welcome to Square Based, the Warhammer Fantasy based podcast around the upcoming Old World game from Games Workshop. In this episode, me, Rob, your host, with my co-host, Val Heffelfinger, will talk about the upcoming launch box and if all the models are 100 years old.
Stay tuned to find out.
Stay tuned. Not bad. I really appreciate you adding the audio in. Okay, go on.
I can't help but produce, you know?
Can't help it. It's in your
The
bones.
goods.
It's in your bones.
It's in there, along with probably some bad things. But, yeah.
Great to see you.
We're back. The Square Bast.
Square Bast podcast. Yes. Quickly becoming some people's favorite YouTube show. Getting a lot of positive comments on the last show. A lot of people being like, "Love this show. Love that crazy American." Anything you want to address around that subject?
Whatever.
What?
I'm from Canada. Come on. Come on. But you'll find that most like a good sizable percentage of American like news readers are Canadian for some reason. So I don't know. Maybe we have a. We tend to dominate media. Maybe we're just affable, neutrally accented people.
Is Taylor Swift Canadian? I don't think so.
No, but she's ending her world tour in Toronto, baby.
Oh, you're a Swiftie. Is this something I don't know about?
It was the talk of the town. She's doing like 6 shows or some nonsense in our big old Sky Dome. And it's the last stop. I don't know if it was just she's like, oh shit, we have to go to Toronto, and she added it. But yeah, it's the last stop of the tour, and it's like 300 and something thousand tickets over the course of the thing. I was blown away.
Wow, yeah, she's a phenomenon. I was gonna say, welcome back everyone. Obviously, last time we recorded was the reveal show, and Gangster Paradise in the chat quite rightly pointing out, he was like, I was terrified that it might have destroyed Val's enthusiasm. A lot of the comments on that show also were, I loved that show just to watch that man's heart break, which is, if you're listening out there, you're evil. So you're a cruel.
I don't think they're like one of my favorite episodes ever of The Simpsons is the Valentine's Day episode. And I know you're not a big Simpsons guy, but in which Bart Simpson gets out the VHS remote and freeze frames it where Lisa breaks Ralph Wiggum's heart. I use that gif a lot that week. Also, I Nostradamus myself by saying that tune in to see me have my heart broken, and then subsequently immediately forgot again. GW is my bad boyfriend. Immediately forgot everything that I knew to be true and allowed myself to get uncomfortably excited for what was the most anticlimactic reveal perhaps of all time.
So can we talk about that in post? Like, because I'm excited to see what the journey you've been on since and the other reactions as it's happened. And just to keep everyone updated who doesn't know, the last reveal, we did a reveal like react show as Games Workshop announced a reveal. Although apparently there's one coming in October, but more on that later.
Warhammer Day.
Warhammer Day. And you and they only showcased, it did talk about the old world, and we thought it was going to finally be the rule books or the launch boxes or whatever that is,
or something big, like maybe a little video or something.
And then they released Elsa from Frozen on a horse.
Just the most milquetoast model, just like a delightful in porcelain collector's plate of a model. People were I was shocked actually at how much people liked it. I mean, it's fine. It's like it's a perfectly cromulent miniature, but like it was not like whoa, let's play this game. It wasn't Space Marines. Come on,
it wasn't. I mean, those Space Marines were.
It wasn't Trog. Was it Trug?
Unfortunately, Trug and Big Pig, which you were a part of, just to kind of keep you updated. I don't know if you've been keeping up to date. It turns out they've invented a new, because we're getting towards the end of Age of Sigmar 3. They've just invented a new style of army where it's basically detachments from 40k Gone.
So they can only come in with certain models.
Yeah, but much more restrictive, and also the power level of them is very bad, with the exception of one, which is completely overpowered. So
sounds like how they do it.
Yeah. So then the hype has been very diminished because everyone was like, yeah, and it's like only in this and also with this, and it doesn't really work, and everyone's like, oh no, not like that. So I want you to know there's also been journey, but yeah. So the fallout, the old world community, how have they felt about it? What's been the situation? Because this is your bread and butter.
Yeah, like Old World Community actually was well, it's filled with naysayers. So I feel like the more they're negged and the more that they are sort of edged along, the better they respond.
Oh, really?
So actually, I found that the Old World forums were actually widely positive. People who were expecting anything were the people who had the bad takes. So me, especially, and or hopeful for anything. So like, yeah, as long as you hope for nothing, you're gonna fit right in.
So is it
There's still a lot of people.
There's
There's
still
still
a nihilists.
Oh, 100%. Well, I mean, they literally blew up the world. So like, what is there? You know what I mean?
True. That's true.
I mean, you gotta be a little nihilistic. Oh crap. So yeah, so I was taken aback by the general level of positivity, especially in the Old World Facebook group, which I've enjoyed plugging around in these days. And then yeah, just the thing is that like there's so little to go off of that like a lot of the conversations just evolve into shut up, you don't know anything. You don't know anything. I mean, the biggest thing we've had recently was Chapter Master Balrak coming on and telling us there was some boxes coming out and that the dates got moved. I assume that's where you get your information is Chapter Master Balrak as well.
He got a blue tick on Twitter, so I blocked him. So
shocker.
I'm afraid. No offense. I'm sure he's a lovely person, but not for me.
Are you sure? I actually have no idea.
I have
no idea.
I'm sure he's
lovely. I feel like he's been disparaged on this channel a few times. So it was a safe.
No way.
Well, probably not since Spice Center anyway. So yeah, so that came out and he was talking pretty intensely about some rumors he was hearing. What were they, Rob? I mean, they're very similar to ones you've been saying for about a month before that. So,
are we gonna dive straight in there? I thought we might, but before we go, we could talk about the main subject straight away. I thought I'd check with how.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, also, so outside of that, so yeah, I mean, I was really hopeful. I was hoping for something more substantial. We didn't get it. It's okay. All in time. And I double back down onto Warhammer Fantasy Battles 8th edition, my personal favorite edition, and have been. I played a game with Vampire. I played 2 games with Vampire Counts against my good Warhammer Fantasy friend Timur, wow. And we had a great time. I lost twice to Wood Elves badly. Well, yeah, no, badly.
Oh dear.
They're very tricky. Those tricksy Wood Elves. But they were really, really great games, and it's so much fun to have the Vampire Counts on the table. As widely known, somehow not a core faction of Old World, so I really wanted to get them as an army I could play in 8th edition while people would still give me an 8th edition game, because that book is so much fun. It really has like it's just, I don't know, it's a really great internally balanced book. I'm going to say a lot of bad tropes, but it's got a lot of fun mechanics. It has, rezzing. It has like, you can res models, but it's not like summoning and other mechanics that I've seen in Games Workshop games where it feels bad for the army. It works well and it's not overwhelming because it's all based on the magic phase, which is so variable and not something you can necessarily count on. And I ran Manfred, who's like this magic powerhouse, but I was definitely a monkey with a computer. It was hard for me to make good use of them. But it was so much fun. Like I really, really enjoy when I get to actually play Warhammer Fantasy. And then after that,
the vampires have got a strong aesthetic as well, right?
I like them. I mean, they've got. I mean, I wound up grabbing a painted army, off of the old Facebauk, I think. I think that's where it popped up. Yeah, it was all over it when I saw it. and it has all of the old GW zombies, which they're a homely bunch, but
Massive hands. Massive hands.
big old jazzy zombie hands, and but you know, like quantity is a quality all of its own. So when they're like competently painted and there's a lot of them, you can't really tell individually how derpy they are, and I like them a lot. So I really really like them.
It's like we're talking about Swifties again. We're just
there
back
you
to
go.
the Swiftie convo.
So that was tremendous. So much fun, in fact, and so devastating to my pocketbook. It spurned two things that I've been working on since then. One, which is the Val Heffelfinger's eBay Miniature Emporium, which you can see somewhat behind me. I've listed over 85 individual items onto the great eBay.
Wow,
including some rare stuff. Hopefully that goes well. We'll see. It's got a couple armies on there that I've priced ludicrously, so hoping for someone to give too much money for those. If not, I'll lower them down over time. And then the other thing is, I'm organizing myself a little Warhammer Fantasy Battles event, Robbo.
I heard this, so this is actually huge news. I'm really excited about this. So do you want to talk us through it? So you're going to so again, this is using the Warhammer Armies project or Warhammer Fantasy Battles. What's the process?
So this is going to be basically we're going to start Friday, November 24th through to Sunday, November 26th.
I am currently
Friday's just going to be a hangout and play if you want. Basically, I need to get down there because we're going to the mini wargaming bunker.
Oh my god. This is my dream of dreams.
I have actually bought it out as well. So I own every cringy Warhammer 40k themed bunk bed room that they have.
Are you kidding me? This is the greatest event already.
And so I've got a personal stock of that for any out of towners who might want to come. You know, maybe old Val will set you up with a delightful bunk bed. Hey, Rob, I'm just saying, chat, Rob, anyone who wants to come, just slide into the old DMs. And then the actual space itself is sort of managed and run by a neighboring hobby shop that operates out of Mini Wargaming's sort of HQ over there. And the gaming space is, I guess, similar to the idea of the arena. It's sort of like a fairly big 20 up to 11. Yeah, it's 11 tables of space. So up to 22 people, which, you know, I think most 40k TOs would be like, but for a fantasy TO, that's a barn. I am trying to fill a airplane hangar with players. Although like people seem to be super excited, so that's really great. I almost have my BCP event put together because they'll run my tickets through there. And and we're gonna run not WAP, we're gonna run 8th edition, but there are these guys called Triple Crown Wargaming, who I love to shout out because they're the ones who organize events at Dabby, or however you say
Dabby.
it. And Dabby, and have been keeping the flame of 8th edition tournaments alive in the UK for, well, basically, I think they started in 2015, so like the year the game ended. But they just kept going for some reason, which is great. And they have their own channel and stuff, and they support the concept of tournaments. So they have a really, I think, pretty well thought out event pack with a comp system that's not too overwhelming. Essentially, there's really no restrictions on your armies. So like each army will have a list of items, and they're usually +1, +1 or 2, or -1 or 2. And so you start with a value of 0. Depending on your selections, you're either going to be positive or negative. And then say you wind up with like a stronger list, and you're, say, a +4 at the end of the end of the event, they deduct your comp score from your tournament score.
Right.
So I think that's actually not a severe way of doing it. It sort of helps guide people into maybe taking the edges off of their list, because they're going to think that, you know, going too heavily comped will impact them.
Just for people to because there might be a bunch of new people who are excited about the old world, or even are just new listeners, or generally are like old world curious but aren't really, like, haven't listened to some of the older shows, or maybe haven't been in the hobby a long time. Comp is like a bunch of effectively house rules that are instigated. Like, and Warhammer Fantasy Battles, as was full of comp. Each event had its own style of comp. That was kind of the conversation that would happen all the time. And effectively, it's because there's a recognition by the community that the game is ultimately not balanced well. Like, the rules and the armies don't work or integrate with each other well in some cases. And so the stuff that's too good, you get taxed for using it, and the stuff that's bad, you get you get incentivized to use it effectively. And the comp system is up for debate many a time because it's almost always based on someone's feelies, which is cool, and they're fine.
So I would say 100%. There are a couple of compacts, though, that were widely used during the era of fantasy battles. So first of all, there was always this was the same in 40K in that era, and I think this is the same in this era for fantasy, but there was always the like raw doggers, and then there was like the people who preferred to play with comp. I was always a comp guy in 40K. Like I was always a big supporter of the ITC, which was a form of comp.
It was a different rule set, basically, in some ways.
In a lot of ways, yeah. But comp creates a different rule set, right? So if you want to play like stock out of the rule book, comp is just going to change that experience full stop, right? But at the time, there were things like Swedish comp, which were like, I'd say quite, like even more than what, say, something like the ITC used to do. Like, they were quite aggressive, I think, in how they limited selections and choices you could take from your armies. I'm not sure how South Coast actually worked. I've never gotten to the nuts and bolts of it. ETC was more similar, I feel, to what I'm feeling like coming out of the Triple Crown guys, in the sense that ETC, the previous, basically it was the European Team Championship, sort of like an Olympics of Warhammer Fantasy. It was the original version of what became the WTC. The main game there for a long time was actually fantasy battles in a team event. And I feel like their comp was a little more similar to the way these guys do it, in which sense, like you have some very, very few hard limits on choices. But even then, they had like maximum amounts of death wizards you could bring. You had limitations of the amount of dice you could throw at a particular spell. In ETC, you could only throw 5 dice at a spell.
I think it's also worth noting. I think it's also worth noting that, like, Val just mentioned that there were some people who just played straight out of the Big Red Book, and I think it's really fair to say that the Big Red Book is like a coke-addled maniac's dream of a book. Like, it's absolutely nonsensical in many ways. Like, I love that book. I would pore over that book for hours and hours, but the game is at its absolute bare bones broken in so many ways. Like, and then it is you start at the you're like, magic phase broken, you're like, cool, and then you move on, right? But
so Rob, the show is a lot of this take, and I disagree like so tremendously. I cannot disagree more.
I was trying to let me get to the defense. let me get to the defense, right? Because even though that was true, and then comp systems were so common because there was just a bunch of adults in the room who were like, obviously we're not doing this silly fuckery. We'll change it up a bit. The game was still brilliant. Like, there were some fundamental flaws, which me and Val have talked about many times, but the game was brilliant. So those comp systems, it also really explains my personality type when it comes to wargaming. Like, I entered into wargaming into a field where it was accepted that Games Workshop didn't do a good job. And it was accepted that the community, or many members of the community, would do work to make the game more fun for the community. And I think that really defines who, like, it's probably like it's defined who I am as as a person in the hobby as well.
And truth be told, I missed those days a lot. It was I knew coming into like looking at the history of stuff. Basically, Games Workshop changes this in a reaction, I'm pretty sure, mostly to AOS. So AOS comes out and is just the worst. And like, the community has to fix it. If they're going to play it, it has to be like fixed. They have to create points. They have to add missions. They have to do all this stuff. 40K was on very, very shaky legs and was essentially kept alive by its community as well. And so I feel like the sort of even though they're not as involved as they could be, even in managing their game right now, the GW that we've sort of come to take for granted as like releasing errata and caring about the game and at least trying a little bit is a very different world than the one that like Warhammer Fantasy Battles existed in, and the game of 7th edition 40k was when I entered the game. It was really a community driven game, and you can't get much more community driven than a game that no longer is published or supported. And that's where 8th edition is right now.
Yeah, and also I kind of wanted to follow up on this because I kind of like before we get into like talking about what's upcoming and stuff, kind of like a. And I want to talk more about your event because I'm excited about that. So let's make sure we circle back to that, please. Pin, as they say, and then we'll synergize.
It's in the parking lot.
Oh fuck! I made myself laugh and I forgot. Shit. What I was gonna
I don't
say,
know. You said synergized, and then your brain fell apart.
Yeah, I know.
What
were you saying? What were you saying? Come on, help me. Help me. Help you.
Well, you were talking about how it was a broken game, and I
it was something after that. It was something. After
and then we were talking about how like these games are community driven and supported, and comp is an attempt. I was gonna say I'll just start talking again on the line that I was on. I find that basically comp in those days the design mechanics were all very zero sum. So like there were very strong mechanics. Like one thing like in fantasy out of the rule book, and apparently this is how they play it even in this pack that I have. They're closed lists, so you don't know who has what items. You don't know what items an opponent has, so there's a lot of nuance to a given list that you're confronted with that you wouldn't actually know sitting across the table. Now, an experienced player will probably 99% know who has what and what items are being used because there's only ever so many good combinations, and if you know what to look for, you won't get gotcha'd. But I would say that like gotcha mechanics and like real very powerful things were like very common in like 7th edition 40k, 8th edition fantasy, and I think they moved away from that in a design method in a big way in sort of the more recent versions of their games. Recent versions of the games are much more open, and you kind of know, like, for example, 40K is set up so that the character unit combinations are literally set in the army list.
That's what I was going to say. We are the problem, the conversation that we're having is that we're discussing 40K and Age of Sigmar, but our game, so Old World, is not being made there. So and also the constant support that you see for the game systems for Warcry, Kill Team, which actually is fairly limited for those two. Outside of big hit 40K, which still they're late on FAQs, they're late on delivery times for balance updates. Like there's like it's not a set in stone process. Like it's mainly good. It's definitely better, obviously. But our game is coming out of Specialist Design Studios, right? But there's kind of two like huge kind of like talking points there. One which is good and one which is bad. One, there probably will be a less comprehensive support structure around that because Blood Bowl, which is Games Workshop's biggest game, 2,500 people at an event in the summer this year, like largest game by far, is done out of Specialist Design Studios, and even then they do get like fairly.
I say Blood Bowl is well supported by rules, I would say. Like
it's well supported by rules, but like clarification to those rules is the thing that I'm discussing. But yeah,
no, I'm saying that they have updated. Like I think they've updated the game twice this year.
Okay, I guess like it's coming into the 10th month. All right, that might be fine. I mean, like a 3-month balance patch is different to anyway. Well, hopeful. That's actually really good. That's great. So I'm actually more keen and confident about that then. But it's also coming out of Specialist Design Studios, and one of the things about them is that they do actually take a lot of community feedback on board. Like they do integrate pretty heavily with the Blood Bowl community. Like the Necromunda guy is literally a Necromunda guy. He's in the forums, being like, I'm cool. A Necromunda guy. So it's most likely that our Old World employee is some one guy,
one sweaty dude,
is probably a fan and probably doesn't have to go through the monolith. So it's like a positive and a negative. There's not as much resources as if it comes out of GW main. So I think comparing it to that is a problem. But it's more like a homebrew studio. And therefore, there might be a much stronger chance of integration with the actual people involved, which is actually really great. Because I think there seems to be a very big delineation between like community 40k. There definitely is in Age of Sigmar, like Age of Sigmar community leaders and Age of Sigmar the company. So like, and I'm sure 40k is probably similar. So anyway, that's what I was gonna say. I was like, it's coming out of Specialist Design Studios. Does that make it fill you with more hope, less hope?
There are a couple of things I think that fill me like give me hope. One is exactly what you're talking about. So SDS is, and even like I've been watching a lot of another plug. Jordan Sorcery has been doing a lot of history videos about sort of Games Workshop. Hilariously, he got to 7th edition Fantasy Battle. He was doing a history of each edition of Warhammer Fantasy, and he got to 7th, and he's stopped. So he's still working on his 7th edition history. And I think that's largely because previous to that, the whole studio was more like what you just described. The entire games development process was much more about who loves this and all right, go take it and run with it. It was also more, like ideas led from the front. That's how, like if it was a good game, they would put resources to it and produce it, like things like War Master and Warhammer Ancients and basically all the old guard, like all the games designers that you can probably name, were sort of in the era of Games Workshop up until about 6th edition, and then transitioning in 7th, a lot of them left. So that's like Alessio Calvatore, Andy Chambers. Obviously, Jervis stayed there, but he moved on to some other things like AOS. And so like it was a really, really sort of golden era for I think nostalgia for the people who were kids when those guys were all doing their work, but also those games were, I don't know, probably developed over longer periods of time, and with maybe a little more care and attention to detail, that they would stand up for a long period. Nowadays, the process feels much more like content creators. So like it is all about shoveling content into the content furnace, getting things out on deadline, moving on to the next thing as fast as you can, with a tremendous amount of output, but not necessarily any focus on quality.
Hey, that's kind of interesting. Like, because I was there at the birth of Games Workshop marketing, like, and the people that were in charge of the marketing at that point were the most uninformed people that they didn't even have their own social medias. So we're talking about people who are like uniquely inept at the job that they were given. But like, that's kind of like an interesting thought to have for another show. I wonder how much their involvement with the content creators, because obviously they started to do a big outreach program to all the different community, content creators, like Mini Wargames is an example.
Genius.
Yeah, of course. But like I wonder how much that actually has been like reflected back. I wonder how much they've walked into a situation and been like, how did they get 300,000 subscribers on their YouTube? What can we do to like emulate, instead of being like a marketing company and following marketing paradigms, like, because they like almost like went into a field of content creators, they were like, are we the content creator? And you're like, that's actually I wonder if they've taken that on mentally, and I've only just clocked that. If that makes sense? It's quite interesting.
At some point, they did realize that, holy shit, if you make more things, you sell more stuff. I think that was probably the light bulb that went off, because I think what really killed fantasy was neglect. I think that's, I don't know. I really want to make my podcast series Who Killed Warhammer Fantasy. I should probably. I keep getting extensions on being able to do it before Old World comes out. But anyway, like really, what killed it was neglect. I mean, it was a game that, like, for example, the last edition, 8th edition, released in summer of 2010. The first arming book was released in March of 2011. When it took 2 months for them to drop a month and a half, it was 2 months to drop Tyranids after the newest edition of 40K came out, I was like, ooh. And like looking at the development pace that they have for books coming out in 40K, I was like, oh, that's how you kill a golden goose. GW's secret sauce, I think, has been relentless releases, and that also is how they've balanced the games. So like, if you have a relentless release pace, there's not enough time for metas to be created, and there's very little time to actually find out what's good or bad. It just keeps moving forward. And sort of chaos is the way that you keep the game interesting. Anyway, it's a bit of a digression.
Feature not a bug. Let's go back to your event where chaos.
Well, actually, no. So before we get there, though, like on the SDS point, a few things that give me hope is like I said, I think clearly it's got to be a labor of love, but also it's been at least on someone's mind for like 5 years. What was it? I think 2018 was when they sort of tipped the hat that they wanted to maybe do this. And so it's at least been percolating that long. Who knows how long they actually worked like actively at creating and developing it, but it's been thought about for that long. And that is not the luxury that any of the other core games have. Like I don't think that there's anything in the development history of GW that has been on the burner as long as Old World has.
My favorite thing about my favorite thing about the about the announcement, they were like, "We're doing Old World." You're like, "Oh my god, exciting! We're doing Kislev." You're like, "Wow, all right, this is interesting." And it turns out, really, they were just assets that they were developing for Creative Assembly for Total Warhammer 3. Yeah, right. And then when they come around to finally do the game, they're like, "Where's Kislev?" They're like, "What the fuck are you talking about? Like, what the fuck? Like, literally not there."
You did point out, I think, that like although they're not announced right now, I mean GW, I think they'd be very wise to add factions because there's going to be a lot of people like me who just have like 99% of what's being released, right? So especially if they don't go back and refresh things with really compelling models. Like they'd be wise to have some net new factions that'll just sell like gangbusters, and I suspect that's exactly what's going to happen. But I mean, it's true. Like I was actually having this conversation with someone else just a day or two ago. That article, it talks about how Kislev's going to be in the Old World. Now that is pre-pandemic. Is that 2019?
This is a great question from when this article is.
Actually, no, that's just pre.
No, it's 23rd of March. 23rd of March, 2020.
2020, so just as pandemic hits. So we have no idea if this was something they originally intended to do and then they dialed back maybe Old World scope. I don't know. Or it's an army that, will be sitting around and watching an Adepticon reveal or something, and boom, Kislev will drop. Boom. Kind of like how Custodes came out of nowhere. The Cathay article, which is very similar, which was actually a Warhammer 3 tie-in, also says that Cathay will be in Warhammer the Old World. So those are things that they have said they're going to do. Did they change course since? I don't know. But it would make sense to me for them to bring in factions that have never existed before. Again, just as a vehicle of getting, existing hobbyists and people who have maybe never entered, a reason to be excited for stuff that's not 25, 30 years old. But anyway, so yeah, that development timeline, that clear passion that you see in stuff like Necromunda and the community engagement you see out of stuff like Blood Bowl, all of that gives me, I think, at the very least, some hope, and also like benefit of the doubt. Maybe I wouldn't extend to something like 40K or AOS, where they have certainly a very large development team, and yet, the reason why we think of there needing to be a 4 times annually balanced patch to something like 40K is because they don't have the luxury of, well, at least management does not give the luxury of the time to get most of it right out of the gates. And so it requires constant patching. It requires, work like that. And also just the weight of how many people actively play it and are able to, find every single nook and cranny of the rule set at incredibly high pace also results in a need for that kind of a pace of balancing. I don't know if we'll necessarily have a meta that's anywhere nearly as advanced as, say, something like 40K or AOS is, just because of the volume of players. Certainly out of the gates isn't gonna compare. So yeah.
No, I mean the production time. I talk about this a lot. Like the production meta is a very real thing. Like obviously, you will have a bunch of people who already have pre-existing Warhammer Fantasy Battle armies. They're going to be able to like co-opt into. I met last night at a gig. Shout out. I met I met two people. I was at a gig last night, Val, for a band called.
You got your faded concert stamp on your hand.
I was at a band. I was at a gig for a band called Necrogoblicon. If you've heard of them,
I love it. Love it.
They're a goblin-themed metal band, and they have a legit goblin come out on stage and dance, which is pretty cool. Anyway, I was at a gig and I met two. Unbelievably, I met only two Warhammer players. But my favorite one was the guy that came up to me and was like, he went, "I'm a sweet narrative chestnutter." That's the first thing he said to me.
That's fabulous.
Which was really fun, and I really enjoyed it. But they both seem really like great dudes. And then the other guy was like, "I've got 10,000 points of Empire ready to go."
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Was he a square baser?
He's a square baser. Yeah.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, he's like, "I got 10,000 points ready to go." So I wonder how many people have them ready to go. And then how many people, but it's going to take a while to produce all of those armies, whatever the situation, right? Out the gates.
Yes. But actually right now, that's actually one of the cool things going on in a lot of these chats. Tomb King Tristan doing what I love to do. Interrupt the show with a new sub thing. All right. What the hell? Oh, it's just people are working on armies out there, man. Like there's lots and lots of people just painting and building and just like there's a lot of pent up getting ready. Like I was talking about the Triple Crown Wargaming guys. Their events have grown, like they doubled in size this year. So again, that's probably going from I think they ran a 32-person event, and then they had the same venue, so they had to run it on 2 weekends, and they ran a 64-person event. But like there is like a palpable sense that there is enough people out there that you can feel good about wherever you are. There's likely going to be someone you can play against, which is really really cool to me. That's what I look forward to a lot, is like just the ability to like be into a game and be able to find people who are excited to play it. And that's what's great about a new edition of really anything. And my final point, and this is gonna be a hot take.
Oh yeah.
This is gonna be a hot take that I think, and I've been saying this out loud a lot because I think there's a lot of people talking also out there about how like maybe Old World will suck, and maybe the mechanic, like the actual game itself, will be bad. And it forced me to say this out loud, which was Games Workshop doesn't really make bad games.
You've said that out loud.
I've said that out loud. I would say that I think they make unpolished games. But like, if I were to be analogous, it'd be like something like Empire Total War was a terrible, unpolished, broken game. But it is an incredible game. And over years of development and modding and all that kind of stuff, it's still one of my favorite things to return to. But I think like when you look at something like all of the editions of 40K that I've played have been incredibly engaging, incredible fun, very deep, just very tall, massive sandwiches that are just like you have to cram your like squish them down and get your mouth barely over it. They're just very dense things, and are incredibly satisfying to play. And I find I don't necessarily, maybe like, well, I don't know, you got into the original AOS, but like there are very few examples out there, maybe 6th edition 40K, where you find like core rule sets that are bad to play, that aren't fun. I think Games Workshop actually, the thing that makes me so upset all the time is how good they actually are at making games, but how bad they are at polishing games and publishing them in a condition that could let them be as good as they should be. I don't know if that is a nuanced enough way to say that.
Oh, are you saying that the games mechanically work-ish? They just need a little bit of refinement?
They just need more, yes. And I think that is ultimately where they always wind
like,
up. Yeah.
So an example would be Cyberpunk, where Cyberpunk last year came out to much applause, but also to a lot of criticism for being, very bereft of like features it had like extolled, which I think is very Games Workshop current, and then also took a long time for modders and other people to develop into something more functional and workable. Yet people bought it at launch and had a good time.
I don't know how many people I think that's probably. I think your average Creative Assembly game is probably the best analogy. I think they couldn't be better partners. In fact, if you want to talk about like, I think if you want to talk about like the mirror and like someone like reaching through the mirror, I think Creative Assembly has reached through the mirror into Games Workshop and pulled in a lot of their bad behaviors. because there's really no point in playing a Creative Assembly game in the first year of launch. Like it is a game of it is futile. And if you do, you have to be ready to put up with some shit. And I feel the same is true, but that doesn't mean it's a bad game. Like Warhammer Total War 3 right now is it launched as an okay game, and now it's probably a great game with all the layers that have been added to it, although it's going through insane controversy right now, which sucks. But like they get better over time because they start out fundamentally good. I think that's the thing. Like you can't have a absolutely shit game at its core and then be able to improve it. A shit sandwich will stay a shit sandwich regardless if you find the good jam and you put it on there. You know what I mean? So that's the way I kind of feel. So that's the number one thing that gives me hope is that like they are good at making games.
I would say that I don't agree, but like I'm not willing to like go down this big deep rabbit hole for a long time. But I would say that like if you were to think about the sheer volume of human time that is spent on buying the product, building the product, painting the product, and then thinking about lists, thinking about the game, and then finally putting those mechanical elements onto a board and playing the game itself doesn't need to stand up to the same level of scrutiny as something, let's say, like Magic, which is almost entirely game dependent, like mechanics dependent. Whereas whereas Games Workshop games have the benefit of most of your time being so front loaded. It's like if you like a good example would be Warhammer events. I think that's a really good example of what we're talking about here. Is if you talk to a 40k guy, like I was at a 40k event the weekend, had a great time. They're like, "What's it like?" And obviously the US events are slightly different to UK events, but I'm gonna add that. But well, the tables were pretty low. It's quite crowded. It's really hot. There was no food available. The organization was like, I guess fine. The train was obviously just like that grey shit that's everywhere. And I had 5 games. And then you're like, how was it? Like, fantastic, brilliant, can't wait to go again, go in next year. And you're like, what was the bit that was good? And they were like, well, I got to be in an event. Like, I think in that situation, people front load the excitement of doing the thing so much that it absolutely overtly carries over like a legitimate review of the thing. Like where you would be like, which is why we've always done those kind of event reviews where it'd be like the tables are too low, the toilets are shit, etc. Like so yes. I think the mechanics of a Games Workshop game, which is heartbreaking for me. Let's all just admit, I have based what I like doing on mechanics of games. I like the interactions, I like the tabletop stuff. I think the mechanics of Warhammer games or Games Workshop games specifically are the lowest selling point. The most because it's also hard locked as well. It is not the number. It's not even. It's the bottom selling point of every one of those systems. And the reason is because you have zero fucking concept of what that is before you drop £150 on a box. Like you walk in at pre-order, which is amazing. So no one knows, right? You walk in and you're like, I don't even know how this fucking works. Here's all of my money, and then you get the thing. And then you build it and you paint it. And when you finally put it on the table, you're like, huh. Like a good example would be I recently picked up Shatterpoint, as you know. And I would say my first 5 to 10 games of that sucked. sucked, and that's because right. Is that my fault? Is that the game's fault? It's my fault because I had no idea what I was doing. Right? Like I was like, I don't really understand how this works and what the fuck's going on. Right? That exactly. But I played copious amounts of certain Games Workshop games, and they mechanically aren't good. Like is my kind of like follow on from that. But
so
it requires a lot of.
Okay, so this is actually.
Go on.
I was listening to the interview with Alessio Calvatore just literally last night, and it was interesting to hear him because he's the writer of Warhammer 40K 5th edition. He's the writer of the original he ran Lord of the Rings, so all of those games still regarded as some of their most mechanically sound games. And he also did Warhammer Fantasy Battle 7th edition core rules, which are considered probably the best core rule set that Fantasy ever had, from just sort of a tightness
6th
perspective.
edition.
And he was so 7th edition core rules was essentially a consolidation of 6th. So 6th launched, and then there was like compendiums and annuals and White Dwarf articles.
Wasn't that the Dark Elf Demon one?
It was, but those are the army books after Alessio leaves to do Lord of the Rings, and that gets handed over to a young man named Matt Ward, and that changing of the guard. By the way, this is why I think my dear friend Jordan Sorcery stuck on the 7th edition of Warhammer, is because that's the beginning of the end. So like when that crew moves on to other things and Fantasy gets handed off to somebody who basically has a different vision for the game from what the core rules were and takes it just fucking 180 degrees in a different direction, that's where things start to unravel. People get very mad. But that's a digression. The point I was trying to make is he was talking about during the development process, he came to it from a very mechanical perspective. He came to it from a balanced perspective. You know, he loved crunch and how rules worked and all that kind of stuff. But when he was interacting with other games designers, he discovered, like he talks about playing with the Perry twins and people who do like scenario-based historical wargaming perspective, for example, in which you're not necessarily worried about like a balanced strategic battle of wits. You're worried about being able to represent whatever scenario it is that you want to do on the table. And it was to him a very different mindset, a completely different mentality that he just didn't relate to or even consider when he was sort of in the beginning of learning how to like design and make games. And for him, it was sort of eye-opening that like people would play that way. You know, like everyone, he actually says, like, look, everyone wants to win, but some people, you know, like how they win doesn't matter. Like if you're doing the Battle of Thermopylae, like, you know, everybody dies, you know, on one side of it. Therefore, you know, like making sure that army, that's not a balanced, you know, game to set up. So therefore, like having balanced mechanics doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is being able to, you know, tell that story or that scenario accurately. So you had that's like two different styles of game design. One's more of a role-playing mentality, and one is more of a Magic the Gathering or like chess-like mentality. He talked about, so I'm just going to digress a bit. Another great thing he talked about was like he said it was a language barrier thing, but I don't think so. I think it was a sort of a philosophy thing. Alessio, obviously from Italy. Where he talks about how he would often talk about how rules were chess-like, and he viewed that as a good thing. He didn't realize that everyone he talked to there thought of that as a bad thing, and what he meant by chess-like was that when you play chess, you aren't aware of the rules of the game. So when you're playing chess, you're only thinking about the moves that you're doing, or like what you do next and all that kind of stuff. You're not trying to process what the like mechanics are. Like, okay, I can move up all this way because it's so simple and perfect. It's just sort of that's at a sub level, and you're only playing at sort of a strategic level. If that makes any sense. And I thought it was kind of an interesting way to conceptualize things. I think it's another way of talking about
the micro isn't important. The macro is important.
Yeah, and it's a different way of talking about sort of easy to learn, difficult to master, sort of that sort of golden toasty, like brown toast type thing. Anyway, I loved listening to him talk about that. But to bring it all to a fine point, what he feels like he learned from that sort of experience talking to these people is the concept of fun, right? So like, and I think when I say they don't make bad games, what I mean by that is they don't make games that aren't necessarily, like, to me, fun to play or engaging or in some way hook you in. So I guess coming back to where how we got on this tangent, it's like, are you hopeful for the old world? Yes, because there's not really a Games Workshop game that I played that I didn't find engaging, that I didn't enjoy, that it didn't make me want to come back and do more, and of course somehow managed to dedicate my life to them, or a good chunk of it anyway. So yeah, so that just baseline gives me hope. I don't think it's going to be a bad game. I think a lot of people are hung up on this idea that it's going to suck. I don't think that's a risk.
That doesn't matter. Like I think that fundamentally doesn't matter, and the fact that it will come out, especially as design studios, and also like that community, and also people like you and me are very comfortable and competent with comp, makes that even more engaging. Like I engage in comp in current game systems like Age of Sigmar. Like I have put many different comps in, like at events, even the current like General's Handbook. There's a couple of the battle plans where like there's one where when you run or you charge, you just take mortal wounds on your units. So I just comp that out, and then like someone was like, "Why?" And I was like,
"Yeah,
what does that do?" Like that does. There's no
yes.
There's no like fun. Like it doesn't do anything. Like. So I just like I'm just not going to put it in, and like that's a really like adult conversation to have. But I agree with people in the chat. I think ultimately, like when you've invested so much time and energy already, you're already going to have a good time. I think most of the time. I think that's very true. So I would agree with you. Like I think fundamentally I would agree with you, but I think we arrive at the end of that in a very different way. I don't think it's because of acumen that they get there. I think it's because
I never said that. Yeah, I never said that. I didn't say why. I just said that like there's been a very few times where I've thought this is a bad game. Even 9th edition and like 9th edition Warhammer 40K, like which embittered me and pushed me out of 40K. It made me mad because they had raised, like the reason why is because it did not meet expectations. Period. Like it did, like they had raised my expectations. And they did not meet them, and they refused to meet them, like literally personally. Like I was in a position in my life where I was talking to folks who could do something about it, and they weren't. And that made me, that just turned me right off. It's like, if you don't care as much as the people who are, if the people who are making it don't care as much as the people who are playing it, that's a problem. I don't think that's going to be a problem for Old World, and that's why I'm hopeful. And also, the community aspect of it makes me hopeful too. But we're just gonna, if something doesn't work, we can fix it. And people who are coming back to Old World from like a previous mentality, they're not used to this very involved GW with tournament rules and packs and all that kind of stuff, and telling you how to play the game, which by the way I pined for years. They're more used to you take what they give you and you make something that works. And so like that to me is fun.
I was actually going to say this. I actually think that. So I've got a bit of journey. I need to tell you two things simultaneously. So I want to quickly. Okay, let me finish this point, and I need to swing back if that's okay. Number one.
Yeah. I'm gonna shut up.
No. Please chip in on these points. It's really important. Number one, I've kind of gone through like a tumult with the Old World, specifically because at the beginning of the year, I think definitely, and everyone in the chat and anyone who's watching back will absolutely fucking dog on me for this, which is fine. But I'm like, there's no way this game can fail. This game is like an absolute gangbuster.
My favorite Onion headline of all time. Yeah. Archduke Ferdinand, no man can stop me.
So I'm like, there's no way. Like Old World, Warhammer Total Old World is massive. The Games Workshop customer base is like, I don't even know. Like it's exponentially bigger than 5 years ago. Like it's grown. Its growth is phenomenal. Like the sheer volume of people that know about Warhammer compared to 6 years ago is huge. Not including other geek culture stuff like Baldur's Gate, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings came out. Like so much stuff. I'm like, this thing is going to do gangbusters. And then they have just hit us with absolutely fucking awful communication. Time and time again. And I would say we're at the point now as kind of like people hopeful for the future where the buzz has been absolutely taken out the back and shot in the head, right? But somehow there's still a buzz. Do you know what I mean? Like it's emanating. There's a background frequency. But I'm now weirdly getting back into the buzz. And my reason is because now I know it's hands-off, like almost disaster. not a disaster, but
Sure.
if you know what I mean. Like, it's almost a classic GW product where there's no communication, it's bad communication, like, and we've got to do a lot of the work. I'm like, oh, that's so fine. Like, actually, that's really exciting. Giving me the building blocks of something that I love and asking me to build a house, fuck yeah. Like, I'm in. Does that make sense? Like, I've come back round to it. I kind of wanted
they'll probably. I mean, there will be a house there. I mean, it might not have windows. There might be broken glass all over the floor, but it'll be our house, and we'll be able to make a cool like tree fort out of it. But yeah, like Games Workshop, like traditionally, if they were Apple, the way they would promote their product is by walking out of the front door of their factory, handing out an iPhone to a bunch of people they happen to run into, shrugging their shoulders and going back inside. Exactly. So, but the thing is, they still handed you an iPhone. And so, like, that one person is going to look at that iPhone and be like, this is kind of neat, and then lose their life to it. So fundamentally, like, there's a I don't know, like a hot takey sort of technology business podcast I listen to, and basically, one of the things he'll always rant about is like never bet against a good product, like a company that has a good product. And so like I think Warhammer, however it gets there, and again, like maybe it's not the mechanics, it's probably the whole melange, right? Like it's the lore, it's the models, it's the years of like walking past their retail locations and seeing the painted stuff, it's the community, it's the friends you meet along the way, it's a whole lot of stuff that goes into making this thing sort of something that can really grab your soul. But at the end of the day, whatever that is, it works really well and tends to make for a satisfying tabletop gaming experience.
So I want to go back to your event, but I need to tell you very quickly about you were making a point about people enjoying games, and it reminded me I need to share a story from last night where again I was at the gig Necrogoblicon.
Necrogoblicon,
and we were at the
Baimon Necrogoblicon show. Yes,
and we were at the merch stall, and Louise, my partner, was talking to like some of the merch people, and I think one of the band dudes. And so a guy who wanted to be involved in the convo, but like was kind of like on the fringe, started talking to me. And then he was like, I really just want to share with them my goblin shaman from World of Warcraft. And I was like, okay. And then started showing me pictures. And then he was like, so this is my goblin shaman. She is like who I play. I have 5 children in the game. And I was like, and I've played World of Warcraft. And I'm like, I don't think you can have kids. And I was like, how do you have kids? And it was like, well, like the other players are kids. And then I was like, okay. I was like, do you fuck the other players? He's like, you've got a dirty mouth. You shouldn't say that. And I was like, you've got 5 kids. What could that's a natural question to ask. I was like,
well, maybe you should have introduced them to the GW concept of no sex in the game, and they're actually just fungoid spores.
Exactly. So you're right. So that's on me. So then, and ultimately, when you were saying earlier that people can have fun playing games, they can. But I want you to know that I think you can have fun the wrong way. I needed to say that. I left that man being like, he also told me he has another character who's an orc who has 4 more kids. And I'm like, why are you just having kids all the time? Why are you like, okay, I'm going to have a kid definitely as a goblin lady shaman, but then I think I need more kids as an orc dad. I'm like...
Maybe he needed to asexually virtually reproduce by creating 2 characters that could then have offspring.
No, they would... I think... maybe they were the same... No, because they had different amounts of kids.
That's fair. Fair.
So I don't logging in being like, love you, darling, then logging out and then logging in and being like, love you too. Like, what the heck?
Hey, I don't understand. I've never engaged with, not for any particular reason. It's just never been something I've lost any time to. So.
I just want you to know that so when some people say they enjoy whenever someone casts Purple Sun on 6 dice, I'm going to empower Purple Sun 6 dice. Yeah, I'm going to think of that man. That's what I'm going to think of. Right. So
fair enough.
I'm like, you're having fun, but in the wrong way right now. So your event, it's going to be in Canada. It's going to be at the Mini Wargaming Bunker. Some would say
Yes.
the last bastion of Warhammer Fantasy Battle content creation.
It is, although not on their official channel. Many will get a quick refresher of how things move around a bit, or even just like so I can get home to my family a little earlier on Sunday. But yeah, I think I'm looking at catering some lunch. It's going to be a fun 5 games, and I'm really excited about too. This is how this whole thing started. Almost an hour and a half of content, but I'm excited too about the comp pack. So the rules that we'll be using on top of the rules. Because again, I think with this era of games, especially because there's going to be a lot of players who are, not dialed in to win it. It won't be like a hardcore tournament, I doubt. It's nice to have something that will level set the game a little bit, just to take the hard edges off and hopefully allow for, less of a zero-sum play experience for a lot of people. Because the 6 dice Purple Sun reference you're making, can make can make for not so much fun.
Yeah, I mean, so, imagine flying across the earth, game 1, putting out your army, and someone goes, you lose.
Again, that would probably be a pretty bad outcome. I don't know. I think a lot of someone was actually asking earlier too, like what. So when we were talking about the evolution of comp systems, we got one of the reasons why comp could work in fantasy was actually the slowness of release. Interestingly enough, so like things would come out, people would sort of be able to agree on what was and wasn't working, and then I think it was a committee that used to do the Swedish comp, which always was the most spoken about one. They would release, their sort of rulings or their adjustments to the game. However, End Times came, and just before End Times, I think they released, it was a glut of army books. I think there was like 6 books that get released in like maybe a 6-month period. Like it was very, very fast.
High elves, dark elves, wood elves, dwarfs,
and they
dwarfs,
like and they were good books. Like they were not. They were very, very powerful books, especially the dark elves and the high elves. And then you go into End Times, and End Times adds all kinds. It adds a whole new, like very, very powerful lore of magic, the lore of undeath, which everyone could use, which I found kind of lame. And then there was, and then they also added characters and units and different versions of the armies. So they united the undead army, so you could play Tomb Kings and vampire counts. It's the best way to play Tomb Kings. And then they gave you combined legions and all sorts of stuff comes out. Basically, the game moves too fast to comp, so the comp falls apart at the end of the game, and and then it blows up. These guys continue on after that. So what I really enjoy is that they have taken the sort of fullness of everything, including the End Times content. So they allow you, for example, to use End Times characters, but they got rid of. So in army building in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, you have a percentage base that you can assign to each type of unit. So like Lords and Heroes, traditionally were 25% of your total points could be Lords and Heroes, which meant that you were generally limited in how much really powerful, magic, mostly magic users you could bring and things like that. And then in End Times, they allowed half of your army list to be Lords and Heroes. So that becomes a bit more about, those big spell casting or fighting models, and didn't really sit well with a lot of people. Anyway, so they allow you to use the characters from End Times, which are often very expensive, but most of a house threw a bunch of lumber and equipment in front of it, and they have over time sort of crafted a comp pack that I think takes in a lot of the stuff that is fun to play and leaves out a lot of the stuff that maybe made it untenable. And Chat and Rob too, I'm going to throw this out to you. This is a decision I need to make, because it's very, very strange to me, is the concept of open versus closed lists. So when you played, it just seems crazy to me.
I think you just do open. I think closed is some sort of like nonsense holdover, which is like I don't think it adds anything to the game in any way, shape, or form. I think it just creates like there is a good feeling. I got you. right? That's literally
exactly,
the feeling.
exactly.
That's the feeling.
It's so I feel like if you were playing with a group of people who have played, and honestly, that's what these guys are. They're a group of people who have played Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition for 8 years, and then what was it? 5 years before that, they've been playing for because they know what's probably out there, and that does become a cool mechanic. But when it's people who don't necessarily know what to expect,
also you're completely unaware. You're like, I don't even know what that item does. I didn't know that you could win the game by having an item I never even knew existed.
Only fantasy tournament I played in, I was playing against Skaven in the last round, and it was in that event they played just rule book, and but it was a group of guys who've been playing with each other, and like they've always played. And so they know everything about everything. I had never played Skaven. I'd never read Skaven. And so I got a situation where I was going to charge into some Plague Monks, and I was evaluating what I needed to charge them with. And I put in what I thought was enough to deal with them quite effectively, ignorant of like something that would be obvious to any experienced like fantasy player who knew Skaven. This friggin' like one use only banner they have that turns them into an absolute blender. And it turned the game significantly, but that was just a moment of, that was the only reason that happened, is because I didn't know Skaven. I didn't know that banner could be there. And if I knew Skaven, I'm going to bet that it's always there. I don't know. Like, it just makes them so good for that turn that like I can't imagine anyone doesn't give their Plague Monks this thing. So like I would have factored for that banner being there and done things differently if I just was aware of the item, but I wasn't, and so I lost on ignorance, and that's a gotcha, and it sucks. So no closed lists.
There you go. I think you've worked through it yourself. I can't imagine a situation where closed lists are healthy for the game, which I think is a negative. So don't do that. Like, that would be my feedback. All right, so looking forward to the event. I'm going to include a link to the event if people want to travel across the world to the event.
Or if you're in the neighborhood, like I'm sure there's people out in around Ontario. People also like don't understate the fact that Mini Wargaming is a destination. It is a mecca of the hobby. Mini Wargaming is what got a lot of people into these games in the first place. And so yeah, you get basically, that's the other cool thing is if because we're staying there, you get 24/7 access to their game room, so that 11 table like Warhammer 40K themed bunker room, and it's basically what it is. It's a Warhammer Airbnb, and like the best deal I've ever seen. So I think it's cool. I'm looking excited to being hosted by them. I hope some of those guys come out to play. I might convince Josh to come out. We'll see.
Yeah. If I went to the Mini,
there's no way my wife would sit down in any of the Warhammer themed rooms. Someone asked, are you going to have sex in the Mini Wargaming bunker? And there is the officers' quarters, which has a queen bed. I'm not sure which bed is worse to risk sleeping in, but
what's the other option?
Well, just a bunk bed. So like, I feel like the bunk beds are just less likely to be coated in gamer semen.
Okay, number one, and I hope this is important for you to know. Yeah, there is a very high percentage chance that there are cameras set up to record you while you're in those rooms. Like they're a professional media company. Like, there is no way that there's not. And follow on from that, I would definitely have sex in a Mini Wargamer bunker, even if it was just myself. Even if it's just on my own, I'd be like,
hey, I have no doubt that there's been that the self love, especially in the bunk bed, top bunk, the 8-foot high club has probably been accepting new members frequently throughout the history of Mini Wargaming. But we have speculated many times on the show whether or not anyone's been laid in there. We'll find. Like, I don't know. Maybe someone will bring a spouse and there'll be an awkward moment in the morning. Who knows?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a spouse. It could just be a random, like, just imagine walking outside and be like, hey, just so you know, like, this is a building where no one's ever banged. Like, it has a virginity aura. Yeah.
Just hit the bars hard and well into Ontario and bring someone back to the bunker. Yeah, all right. Let's see what happens, guys. That is a full on that will be a full on trophy as well at the end in the awards ceremony. First, somebody got laid in the bunker. Everybody.
All right, perfect. So so to bring us on to our main topic.
Yeah,
we've nailed it. We got there. 1 hour 12 in. That's pretty standard on this Wargamer time, to be honest. The launch box. So the launch of the old world. Now, rumors have been abound that the release was set for November. However, rumors abound that the schedule at Games Workshop, because of a small printing error with their Gaitanicus, their small epic 40k game or 30k game, whatever, has been delayed. I don't know if they've publicly stated it's been delayed, but like it is gone, and therefore the schedule is a mess, as I understand it. So I've heard that the old world has been moved, and we're looking at a January date now, which is pretty exciting. So that's fun. That's not that far away. It's not that far away.
Nope.
We're only 4 months away, quarter of a year. Long to prep, and then we're hearing the rumor that it's going to be a couple of launch boxes. So not just the one, 2 launch boxes. So one for Bretonnians, one from Tomb Kings, which kind of makes a lot of sense. You know, like you do get this with FOMO boxes. You buy a box, you only want half of it. You don't really want the other half. It goes to waste. And so you can buy in on the faction that you really want to buy into. So what are your thoughts about the timeline and those initial rumors, Mr. Val?
Timeline, couple months doesn't make a big difference to me. One thing that does, so I don't know, this may have been your point that we said in chat. One thing is that it does move Old World into the, I guess, Q3 for them. So their fiscal year starts in June. So that gets them into Q3, and they also do half-year reporting. So essentially, you know, they have 2 big reports that they do each year about how sales have gone. And that would mean that Old World falls into, you know, 2 quarters that don't have currently lined up a massive release, some big drop. We had 10th edition 40K come out in Q1 of this year. That'll be on their half-year report. It's going to be massive because they sold the hell out of that. So, you know, like they're looking to pad some good news into the second half of the year. That's okay. One thing that I do find a bit strange about it is if you're releasing in January, that means you probably have to be talking about it with some specificity before January, which probably means November or December. You're at least acknowledging that it's out there and that it's coming, which means that would put them in a position where they're probably because the reason why GW hates leaks about upcoming releases is they believe that excuse me. They believe that if you know what's coming, you'll plan your purchases, and therefore spend less because you won't emotionally buy every single thing that comes out. I'm just looking at Robbie roll his eyes here, and you won't emotionally buy everything that comes out. However, if something as big as Old World's coming, and this is gonna be in Canadian dollars, I imagine a $300 plus box. Or 200 to 300 at least, then like that's gonna sap stuff from their Christmas rush, I would think, or at least make people want to hold off who are interested, because they're always going to have things like on Warhammer Damn Sure they'll announce all of their Christmas boxes and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know, I'm overthinking it a little bit, but I just find that like it seems a bit strange that they would drop something there because November would have just made a lot more sense. So
I don't know if the Christmas boxes are I understand that the Christmas boxes, like a store gets like 2 or something, and like that's all that's floating around. I think it's like a nice bonus for them. I don't think it's something they like core. I think they do a core release. You know, like they've actually left Space Marines pretty late. Like we know Space Marines Codex still not been announced, and we're in September. Like you know, it's the 21st. So like you know, it's pretty crazy that we've had the Space Marines Codex is probably going to come out in October, and it's probably like.
If that's the Christmas release, really, yeah.
Yeah, like it's it's close towards pushing towards that Christmas release. There's probably going to be some fantasy stuff. I don't think there'll be like a big 40k army, but there could be a big 40k army, or something along that lines as well. But they've been really drip feeding 40k. which I think is quite interesting as well. But either way, like, I'm not too bothered about that. I'm just excited about it finally being like talked about and announced, and those launch boxes. And we know those launch boxes are going to be Tomb Kings and Bretonnia. They've said that already, which is fun. So like now, I guess the real question is, like, what form does that take? Because I think that's kind of interesting. Most times when they launch a game, or
yes, it's the starter set.
It's the starter
with
set,
like
so
the two halves.
Yeah.
So maybe I wonder if what it is that, and again, this is applying logic to a chaotic company, but Horus Heresy, the most recent launch box for Horus Heresy, was kind of cool in the sense that it was a box of models that could be split, or it was just one pretty beefy army. And so I wonder if they took away from that. People seem to like having one beefy army, or maybe they noticed that people will often buy two starter sets and then trade with a friend or something like that. Or like two people buy two starter sets, one person takes two halves, and the other one person takes two halves, because that gives you more models to actually start something useful with. So maybe it's something like that. The only thing that gives me pause is that I'm kind of worried that they're going to be like army battle boxes that like don't have a rule book, and like because on the initial release, I want the FOMO box. I want something that's got a limited rule book in it with some like cool shit like trinkets, and then like a bunch of models. Like that's what I want. So I'm hoping that's what it is. But we'll see. Like that it's not a individual rule book, and then they release some battle boxes. You know what I mean? Because that would be very strange.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the books are actually just going to be completely independent of the miniatures themselves. I feel like it's going to be, your old traditional start collecting kind of art battle boxes that they used to do, where it's just going to be processed. So, which I think maybe as a consumer feels like the kind, let's be clear, because obviously all rules should be free, is the correct, like getting a new Tomb King book is fun,
Hell yeah.
And
I can't wait to see it. Because it's going to be SDS designed. Like, again, I'm really sick of the disposable feeling of like a lot of the most recent, the point where I have just about everything that was released from 8th edition. Maybe that's why they feel like they have a more artisanal quality to them.
Well,
but
some of them are very tactile.
Yeah. Yes, for sure. Like the Forge World stuff, especially, or SDS now. Like they are good at making objects, right? So like I do look forward to, like, I don't know. It'll be after we can celebrate Orthodox calendar Christmas on January 7th with hopefully some nice faux leather, soft touch materials on the binding.
I mean, ultimately, like, and I've said this on the chat, I said this on the show a lot, rules should be free, but like, you don't need, like, that you can sell me books. Like, I'm not anti-book. I like books for them, because if they've majorly made a mess, being able to, like, go back and fix those elements becomes more difficult, because they're like, they're invalidating that. But I do love
if you're buying game pieces, like the rules for those game pieces should be a feature of the game piece. And they came with rules for the model. So you buy the model, you have it, and boom, that's it. You can put it on the table. That was like the tiny little hatchling of an idea that was good. Because I do clearly love a lot of the stuff these guys do. One thing that they are really good at, or it had been for a long time, especially in their publishing arm, Black Library, is books became quite just like music. They were commodified, digital killed books. There aren't really maps you can collect and have on your shelf. Whether or not you use it as a book, it still gives us weird monkey humans a positive feeling to hold these things and to be able to physically look through them and do that. So Black Library, I think, leaned into that by creating like their limited editions and just making that sort of that object elements that went into making that a successful product. Understood what the benefits of having a reference object, because they're usually big, heavy, ungainly, and poorly laid out for like referencing.
Yeah, that's the best. That's the best bit is that like as a game piece, they're atrocious. Like as a reference tool, they suck. Like very sized bit of table in front of them on their table before their army to reference stuff. So yeah, it's actually really funny that fundamentally the thing that they won't. Yeah.
And actually, we talk a lot about Wahapedia.ru here, or at least we had in the past. So much easier. Forget that it's free because it's pirated. Beyond that, it's a superior product. Like is actually a better way to use the rules. And in fantasy, there's WHFB.app, 8th, and it has Warhammer Armies Project. And it is also it's written in a way that's mobile friendly of Warhammer Fantasy Battles. So much easier because I can do a keyword search. I can find what I want. If that rule references another rule, that other rule is hyperlinked set of like information, like or like a like a proper wiki, right? So like that is a great reference tool, WHFB.app. And includes, you can't build army lists out of it because that's not what it's for. It's designed for rules referencing, and it's friggin' fantastic.
Okay, good. All right. Well, so like to circle back to some new Tomb Kangs, and we have seen some new Bretonnians, the ladies included. So, do you think it's going to be a core box where it's like, look, let's take Tomb Kings as an example. Here's a bunch of skeleton warriors. Here's some chariots. These are the things that you need. Like, this is the core, because you literally have core in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. After that, we're going to sell you the characters and, your specials and rares in addition. Or do you think it's going to be kind of like there'll be a Tomb King in there, there'll be a couple of characters, way to go about it? You almost feel like you want to sell people. I want to be able to buy multiple core. Like obviously in Warhammer Fantasy Battles, Age of Sigmar 40k are the same. You normally need some fundamental units, but those can be quite diverse. They can be quite a few different units. So in some armies, not, but in most armies, yes. But Warhammer Fantasy Battles, you actually need some fundamental units before you can even, we talk about tax. So what do you
haven't seen a single plastic sprue yet for Old World. That is new. We've seen them bringing back all of the old Plow IP Tree Man, but like we haven't seen anything new. And as someone who is addicted to them scaly, spooky bones right now, I have been just fighting temptation on picking up Tomb Kings because I realized at some point, I bought a very small lot of them, and I realized that we actually haven't seen when I saw that the Knights of the Realm Bretonnians, which is a core element of the Bretonnians, and the Men at Arms for the Bretonnians, a core element of Bretonnians, were not new. They were the old plastics. I immediately assumed that we probably weren't going to see core refreshes, and that was that. Failing to think that there's no reason why Tomb Kings skeletons, like their core infantry, which are ancient and definitely not a CAD sculpt, so they have like big chunky weapons. They're brutal. There's no reason why that couldn't get redone. There's no reason why a lot of the stuff that wasn't redone coming into 8th edition, there was a really great Tomb Kings release for 8th edition, doesn't get redone. So I have held off as a result. And I'm hopeful that we do see some of the most outlandishly old kits that don't hold up, like Tomb King's core infantry, like their skeleton horsemen, like their chariots. I'm hopeful that we see those get remade. That'll break a lot of people's hearts who spent crazy money on Tomb Kings.
I do not think they went out of print. Remade. I do not.
You don't think they're getting remade? Well, I'm hopeful, and we'll see. So whether or not they get remade, I think my gut is that just from like a logistics perspective, it's hard. It's going to be hard for them to support this game because it's an entire Warhammer game. So with a lot of even limiting the core factions to the 10, I don't know. It's a big list. 8. Okay, so limiting it to 8 plus probably a couple wild cards that they drop. That's a lot of like miniatures kits to support on top of an already strained supply system for core games that they're also selling like 40K and AOS. So I'm wondering if maybe we don't see like the old-fashioned big battle forces sort of as like the lead-off release for most of their army books as they come out. So like you can buy one big FOMO box, and that's kind of what you can work with for a while. That would not be surprising to me. So I would expect in these release boxes that you get, some like a hero or two, you get some core units, you get some special, maybe a rare, and then two of them makes an army. That's kind of what I feel like.
Okay, that's fun, and that's what you're hopeful for.
I don't know what I'm hopeful for. I'm hopeful for like the derpiest of the derp to get underped and remade, and you're tapping my foot and saying it's probably not going to happen, bud. And that's
I'm not. I think based on the media that we've seen, I think we're not going to. You're not going to get a whole Tomb King's range refresh. I think you're going to see.
But it doesn't have to be the whole. Like we're talking about 3 units. Really,
I don't see that personally, but like maybe we are. Like I just don't see that being the case. I think what they're going to focus on is going to be a lot of new characters, and if there was going to be, like a new kits of that scale, because it's like you say, it's like stock and scale. Then I think it's probably going to be on like a new faction, as you talked about, something like Kislev or something else. That's probably where most of that work has gone into, versus something. Like that, and they've shown Old Bretonians. I feel like they're at the stage of showing us Old Bretonians. They're just going to do old skeletons as well.
And I don't want to give them this credit. It could also be a savvy call in their own eyes, in the sense that they can see that there is, at the very least, pent up demand for a lot of these kits that went out of print. Mm-hmm. Because that's the ultimate FOMO, is like when things go out of print, you literally can't get them. And so that's increased their pricing, and maybe their thought is, hey, people want to eat this shit up anyway. Why invest time in redesigning it? Why not just sell them the old stuff at first, get the suckers, and then if we want to, we can double back and refresh it later. But like that feels kind of craven and savvy. And then maybe what you see is a refresh to a line of models that we're not expecting. But in that core lineup, there aren't a lot of shitty plastic kits. Like the armies that they're leading with are actually the oldest and worst ones that they are releasing. In that, like, the elves all got redone, Empire got redone. The orcs are, the elves look great. Yeah,
the elves look great.
So
look great.
I don't know, man. That. Yeah.
I'd also like to say that, like, I think. Again, just to kind of circle back to this, because I feel maybe as a show, like, obviously open to interpretation. Like, life should be a book that you're constantly writing, you're always changing your mind, like, and improving what you think about stuff, like, thanks to new input of information. But like, I'm putting my flag in that none of the decisions are mercantile. Like, you were just talking about they could do this, they could do that. I feel like none of these conversations are happening. Zero. I feel like all of the conversations are just like, I really wanted, like, in 1982, I wrote like a homebrew story about how my Bretonian lord did in my flag that they are passionate hobbyists in this section, and if we see poor decisions from that particular element of the company, I bet you could sit down with them at the pub and they'd be like, the Tomb King kit is legit. Like, they'll think those skeleton warriors
from the existing player base, and or at least the existing, like, it's sort of like how when 8th edition dropped. I don't know the era for the game. 8th edition comes, it's new GW, it's all that exciting stuff. I think what they did was they reactivated a lot of old bitter gamers who had sort of dropped off after 5th edition, turned into 6th. And so I really wonder how, maybe not consciously, because maybe it's just these are who they are, who are making these games. Just the idea is that, like, we're going to reactivate this user base, this group of people. We're going to forget the fact that there's also people who are interested from Warhammer, Total War, and all that kind of stuff. We're just going to reactivate this base, and we're going to give them the things that they wanted. And that's very possible. And the thing that makes me feel a little bit differently about that is that the indications that they gave in that very, very light on detail designer diary on game mechanics suggested to me that they're reimagining how the game actually works. And I will say that it sure feels like when they rewrote Horus Heresy, that they rewrote it in a cleaner way. I feel like Blood Bowl, the actual rulebook, I don't know if you played it or read through it, is written in a tight, good way. I feel I haven't read Necromunda, and I don't know if it's a similar developer, but like
It's a different developer.
I feel
It's still SDS.
like it's still SDS, but like the actual individuals within SDS will vary. So like I'm not as, whereas once upon a time I figured it was going to be a throwback, actually be written as a game too. We'll see. I understand where you're coming from though, but I'm just saying, like, I see indications from other games that they've made from the studio that, you know, they haven't totally missed all the other things that have been going on. We're not just going to get, you know, a 6th edition core rulebook, which is what a lot of people are pining for. Warhammer Fantasy, and it's going to take, obviously, it's going to take influence from previous games. It's going to feel like Warhammer Fantasy, but it's going to be its own edition. I think this is going to be its own thing.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, what you think are going to be in those start boxes? Do you think it's going to be all old models, new models, a mix, different stuff? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I know Val will be responding to those in somewhere between 7 minutes to 24 hours, depending.
If you could give me moderator access, then I would actually get notifications. I could get this thing under a minute.
All right.
Literally just give me some mod access, and you know, I'll be way more.
I'm going to put all of the links in.
I'm
going to look to see if I can get there. Yeah.
Let's talk to my people. I got accommodation for you. We just got to figure out getting you across the pond.
That's it. And then
I still have an old golden ticket for an LVO that didn't quite work out. So.
And then I gotta work out what army I would play. That's a drama, which is exciting. But I hope the event goes well. And right. Okay. So thanks, Val, for being on the show. Go on.
And again, for that event, I will be dropping information on. I guess I'll probably drop it out on Twitter. I'm Val Heffelfinger, and Facebook is where I am a lot of the time. I'll drop it into the Honest Wargamer. So yeah, like I would love to get the full place filled with Fantasy Battles nerds.
Warhammer Fantasy podcasts. That's right. I'm putting a flag down again, second flag of the day. So do check us out if you